Welcome to Your Town. I'm Chef Wendy Brodie with Art of Food, the culinary hospitality host. My guest today is Pamela Burns, the Wild Plum Cafe. Or is it Wild Plum Cafe?
The Wild Plum Cafe. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. You're right.
Yes. Anyway, welcome.
Thank you.
We've known each other years and
Yes.
years and years, but we're not that old. I should take one of these sets of years back. But we really haven't known each other than through professional circumstances,
Yeah.
other than I thought you were incredible.
Oh, thank
First
you.
from your pasta incarnation,
Yes,
and
thank
then
you.
with some of our American Culinary Federation chapter chef get-togethers, you have brought the most incredible muffins I've ever
Oh,
tasted,
thank
and
you.
I'm not telling a fib. They really are. They
Thank
just
you.
were moist, melted in your mouth, had the sugary, crunchy top. Oh my God! So
Thank you.
tell us how you got started,
Okay.
and anything and everything about you. We want to know. And if you care to share a recipe, so much
I'd love to. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'll interrupt myself one more time. I know that you are just nothing but sustainable, from the salt of the earth, the best food, the best ingredients, sustainable, as I'm saying twice, and part of the slow food.
And Slow Money.
Slow Money,
Yeah, and
okay.
Slow Money. Yeah, Slow Money. We brought a chapter of Slow Money, which is a national grassroots organization, to Monterey, which is all about sustainability along the food chain. So we're really excited about that. But I got my start probably while I was in college, actually. I've been baking since I was 14. My great aunts taught me how to bake. There were 13 children in my grandmother's family.
Wow.
And most of my great uncles were ranchers or farmers. I had somebody who did apricots and plums, and someone else who raised beef, and so I grew up with this kind of landscape, and every landscape of animal husbandry and farming and ranching, and everybody had a garden. And these were just not your typical gardens. Like my Aunt Effie and my Uncle Kurt, they lived in Corlitas, and they
the sausage capital.
yeah, and they had blackberries, and they didn't just have a few blackberry bushes. They had like 2 acres of blackberries. So everyone had, and then they grew other things, like corn and whatever could grow in that climate. And they had Corlitas has that wonderful little sort of sun belt that really has a wonderful climate. So I grew up sort of not eating tomatoes out of cans, but tomatoes out of jars. Not that we didn't have a canned tomato in our lives, but and pickles, there'd be pickles going up the coast one way and tomatoes coming down the coast another, and so that's sort of how we grew up. So I think that I always like to say that the die was cast decades before I ever thought that I would be a chef, And so I started baking, and then I was going to college actually to be a teacher, and I worked on the weekends. I taught during the week, and then I worked on the weekends at restaurants, and everybody had a crisis of some sort. They needed cakes, they needed cookies, they needed a pie. And so I was constantly saying, oh, I'll do that. Oh, sure, I can make those for you. Or, someone would be having, a meltdown in the back, chef, because they needed pie. And in those days, especially, chefs, there weren't a lot of chefs who could also do baking. And a lot of people didn't do their own baking on site. They would purchase desserts from a bakery or something. So that's kind of how I started. And that was in the mid 70s. And being a pastry chef, it wasn't on my radar. I was on my path. And it wasn't until I started doing it and I started spending more time in the back of the house and in the front of the house that I started thinking about becoming you know, I started having this split love, this love for children and this love for cooking. And I had an epiphany. I had a moment.
That's great when that happens.
And I wasn't able to I wasn't able to go forward for financial reasons with my education to finish my degree. And I was standing in line when they had rejected my W-2 because they said I'd made too much money. I think I had made like $5,000 or something. And I thought, well, surely there's a mistake. And I'm not someone who takes no for an answer. But I just remember I stood there, I stepped out of line, and I stood there holding my little W-2. And I made a decision right on the spot that I was going to become a pastry chef, and I was going to become the best pastry chef that I could possibly be. And I walked out of that institution and never went back. And that was the beginning of my journey. And then I started apprenticing, I started reading. I never went to culinary school. I just learned in the kitchen and learned by reading. That's really how I started.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, and I worked with Michael Clark.
Yes.
I begged to be in his kitchen, and it was one of the best experiences I ever had in a kitchen anywhere.
Now, is he back in the area?
You know, I think he's in the Soquel area. Wow. Yes, yeah, I think he is. He went to Hawaii for a while, and I think he's back. He's a wonderful chef. I mean, he was so talented.
Yes, yes.
And not that he's not now,
and
but
then
I mean,
he went into construction, didn't he? Wasn't he?
Oh,
doing that?
I didn't know that.
I may be wrong, but I thought something to do.
Well, I know he's back in the restaurant business now, and I know he's catering, but I haven't seen him for years.
We'll have to find him.
Yes, we will. I know. I really learned. It was one of those. Michael had gone through the whole stage in Europe at the Savoy, and so even at 32 years old, he was very young. We were all very young, but he was our fearless leader, and he knew so much about wine. And I just have always been so grateful because even though I called myself the tomato girl, they didn't let me touch anything else in that kitchen but the vegetables. I was the vegetable person. And, but you know, that's where you start. I love that fact. I love the fact that you go into a kitchen and you work really hard and you do all the menial jobs like peeling
I don't
onions.
think there is such a thing. Even the dishwasher is so important.
Incredibly important.
Yes.
Oh, the most important person in the kitchen, I think, is a dishwasher. 100%.
And
100%.
whoever answers the phone, they say in business. So I agree.
But anyway, so that's where that was really my first sort of serious kitchen that I worked in. But I would come to work in the morning, and there would be rabbits and birds hanging, ready to break down. And he made all of his own pâtés and stocks, and he could make puff pastry like the rest of us dream about rolling out a pie. I mean, he was just very, very talented. And so you're observing all that. And I always say that's the good stuff. If you can be in a kitchen where they're making everything, that's where you want to be.
That was a good thing about cooking school. So you got the same experience because they were teaching you to do it, and you got to see how it was done. And
I got to taste.
Yeah.
And I got to taste. So we'd come back from a catering job, and oftentimes he would open a bottle of wine and let us taste it, and then explain to us, because he was just a master of wine as well, and talk to us about wine. So that was really a brilliant experience. And he was really the person that brought me to Carmel.
Oh.
I left Michael and went and had my first, I call it pastry boot camp, my first official job as a professional baker, and I was not ready at all.
Are we ever really? I've been thrown into one too many things.
I was not at that level at all. They gave me a card and I said, well, maybe not pass these out quite yet. And then I got a call from Michael, who was doing some consulting work in Carmel, and they were opening a restaurant and wanted someone. And my forte, my love, was Americana baking and those rustic baking. And so in the meantime, I'd gone to Europe and traveled a little bit and worked someplace else. And then when I was in my kind of late 20s, around 27, I came to Carmel, 26, 27, and worked here and started here, and then that's where I got the idea to start the pasta company. So I was really on the footfalls of my journey as a pastry chef when I started my first business.
Well, I'll never forget, because the pasta, you were making stripes and
Yes.
colors and
weaving them together to make
I
lasagna
was
sheets.
just blown away by that.
Oh,
It was so
thank you.
inspirational. And then I couldn't buy it anymore. darn.
Well, they wouldn't let me play anymore. They made
But
me.
you played so beautifully.
They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't. You know, at some point, I wanted to do these sort of airbrushed kind of lasagna sheets with the beet and the saffron and the spinach. They were really gorgeous. They really were. And we did raviolis, but it was a lot of, they were really art pieces. It was really, you had to laminate the sheet and weave the colors in, and I loved doing it, but at some point my partner said, you know, this really isn't a profitable line of our business.
Right.
You're staying up all night doing these kind of special things for chefs, but I did all kinds of fun things. The chef, I forget, out at Carmel Valley Ranch at the time, Julia Childs was here, and I made handmade bow tie pasta for her.
Oh,
And
how
also I did
special.
it really was, and I did an apricot filled ravioli for her, and it was delicious. I heard that she loved it. And
was it as a dessert or
they were doing it as a dessert.
Oh,
At the end of the day, I think they were doing some kind of ricotta ice cream or something, and so I imagined that, and then the pasta was
I haven't had lunch yet. I'm getting hungry.
the pasta was served as a first course, but so anyway, that's how I got started, and then I had the pasta company for several years, a little over a decade.
Wow.
That we grew that into quite a big company.
Yes, you did. Very impressive.
Yeah, and then kind of came back around into the kitchen again. So.
And then was Wild Plum right after that? Or
Well, I did. I was in a partnership for about 4 or 5 years. I had a restaurant that I got involved in a restaurant. I was invited to join, and I had a wholesale bakery. Then that was the 6th Avenue Grill in Carmel, and which is now Grazing's.
Oh, okay.
And then after the restaurant and the bakery, I had a wholesale bakery. We lost our lease, and so and at the time it was almost impossible to find locations with water. Almost impossible.
Yes.
So I took 6 months and sort of regrouped, and then I started the Wild Plum Cafe. Yeah, and that was 20 years ago. We're going to be 20 this summer.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
It's
so
a
it's
charming place.
Oh, thank you.
I'm always driving by and thinking, oh, darn, I need to stop there sometime.
Yeah. It is. It's a lot of fun. I love it. I love, and and it's evolved over the years. In the beginning, we've always been an everyman cafe, and that was really my dream. I've always had the dream of doing kind of I call it European American fusion, because I was very influenced by European cooking, galettes, rustic. I loved the rustic, and I grew up that way. And I really wanted to do something that really showcased regional American cooking at its best. That's how I grew up. And I used to get so upset when I was younger that people would really, especially in the 70s and 80s, bash American cuisine, and I said, well, that's because you've never had it. You haven't eaten it really, because regional American cuisine is just some of the best food that you can get anywhere.
And I find over the years that really Americans are the ones that we've had all these different family influences from
Yes.
people coming from all parts of the world.
Yes.
And we're not tied by tradition and
Yes.
apprenticeship and all of those things. So we have I think, a better ability to be more creative, taking this idea and marrying it with that.
Absolutely.
So
And be open.
yeah.
And be open. I agree 100%. And I think all of those influences, all of those things have influenced my cooking. I think that I'm always drawing a path to the flavors that I tasted at my mother's table. That was really my first teacher. She was an amazing cook with an incredible palate. And so I would come home from school and open the door, and there would be oxtail soup simmering on the stove. She might be curing a beef tongue. You know, we just had this really rich diversity. The foods were simple.
Well, you came, and I kind of want to bring it back because sustainability, those were your roots.
Those were absolutely 100%.
So I don't want to let that word slide by
Yes,
and
it's
not
very
have
important.
you talk about it a little bit more,
Yeah.
and we'll wind up with that.
Yeah, so for me, you know, we started, like I said, as an everyman cafe and really wanting to have the best bowl of soup you ever had and always using the best ingredients. We've always used organic greens in the restaurant for 20 years because we have Earthbound Farms here, and so always.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always possible to have everything organic in the beginning. It's really only been in the last 10 years that on the peninsula we've had with the more farmers markets available, more ingredients have become available. You know, we've always lived in the salad bowl. We've always had incredible ingredients. But to have those ingredients be organic, locally sourced, grown right in our backyard hasn't always been possible, even though we're surrounded by, you know, big farming. You don't always, it's not the same as a small farmer and a small farm where they're growing it right here.
Yeah.
And maybe Taylor Farms is, you know, and a lot of their product is grown, and I think they have a great product. But I think there might be some larger names in the agriculture community that are out there, but you're not always getting that their product is not always being grown in our backyard. You might be getting something from Arizona or from Mexico.
Yeah.
And so that really became important. And so every year we've just evolved to, we're now about 95, 98% organic. You know, we may have one or two ingredients that aren't, but everything is clean, everything is GMO free. And it's really about creating a sustainable culture and having a sustainable having that smaller footprint, having that combination of working with small farms to promote them, and just the flavors. Oh my gosh, when the greens come from Happy Boy Farms or from Brian's Ranch, you know, you just open up the box and it's such artistry.
It's love.
It is.
Blossoming.
I just want to take the greens around and say, "Can you believe these? They're so amazing!" And the carrots and all of that. So it's really a lot of fun. And you know, people say it takes a village, and in our case, it takes a farm village.
Yeah. Well, I
So-
want to thank you so much, and Wild Plum couldn't be a lovelier place to
Thank
go.
you.
And
Thank you so
I
much.
wish I lived a little closer and didn't do the drive-by. But anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me,
and
Wendy. It's been great. Yeah,
Take
great.
care.
Yes.